So, how's it hanging, dudes? My name is Sean, and welcome back to Brutal Games and another Cyberpunk 2077 video. I hope you enjoyed that introduction to what I hope will be a condensed and easy to understand backstory and birth of the Cyberpunk genre as a whole, right? This is part of one of potentially 3 video docuseries explaining the existence of the genre and its inevitable rise to stardom, which is only being perpetrated by CD Projekt Red. And rightfully so, might I add. And I just wanted to say like a quick thanks to everyone who showed up and gave their love on the last upload that I just made a day or two ago. And as always, if you guys think that I've earned your like and subscription by the end of the video, please do so. If not a like, then any constructive critiques is fully welcomed. I'm trying to get better every day at this cyberpunk stuff, and I am still kind of new to it, but I am open-minded and always willing to fix my flaws. Also, let me know about the intro music. Is that bass okay now? It's not too loud, right? I've had a few comments about that, so I'll try to fix that. And I'd also love to know about anything in the comments, critiques, or if you liked the video, what I could add into the next one, or what I should have put in. I do read every single comment, and I do reply to most. Now that the formalities are out of the way, a woman applies her makeup as the camera slowly pulls out to reveal she's missing the bottom half of her face. A gaping cybernetic maw in its place. A cable jacked directly into a businessman's skull, sparking and smoking as it fries his brain. An elevator, the size of an apartment, crawling up the side of a high-rise towards the sky. These are just some of the fragmented clips that Studio CD Projekt Red put on display in Cyberpunk 2077's debut trailer earlier this year. As an introduction to Night City, it promised one of the most distinctive game settings since The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2. But not much of its neon-drenched imagery and immersion is original, and that's by design. In 1988, Cyberpunk made its first move to the tabletop with the release of Cyberpunk, a pen-and-paper role-playing game written by Mike Pondsmith. There's a long chain of events that happened before the brilliance of Mike Pondsmith's tabletop game, and way before CD Projekt Red's announcement of the electronic game. This is a documentation of those events, which led to the powerhouse that we all know today as Cyberpunk 2077. The tabletop game and the genre shares more than just a name with Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red's video game is a direct adaptation, moving away from the group of people sitting around a tabletop to a first-person, open-world, single-player experience, but keeping its world, characters, classes, and the input of its creator. So yes, the immersive imagery is by design. Actually, everything in this game is in fact handcrafted, meticulous design at that. Pondsmith stated how he personally defines cyberpunk as a genre. Street level life crushed under overwhelming political and social forces, but which uses combinations of found, scavenged, repurposed technology to fight back and achieve personal freedom. With this game, CD Projekt Red is drawing from a long tradition, one that usually is named right after the one in the title, Cyberpunk. But what does that mean, and where did it come from, and how did this all start? Bruce Bethke, the writer who first coined Cyberpunk, talked about the birth of the genre and said this: "Understand, when I came up with the C word in 1980, all I was trying to do was come up with a snappy, one-word title for the story. And I was not trying to define a genre, launch a movement, or do anything more than come up with a memorable one-word marketing label for the story that would, I hoped, and compress the core idea down to a few syllables, and this was the important part, stick in an editor's mind and help me sell the thing to a magazine. Apparently, I overdid it." When the story was published in 1983, Bethke unintentionally and accidentally, in his words, tapped into something larger. As he said, he was just trying to make, a marketing ploy, something that would sell in that moment in time. Little did he know that he just sparked a huge industry within gaming, films, and so many other facets of entertainment. Later, subsequent films and other series like Blade Runner or Neuromancer by William Gibson, among countless others, took inspiration by the newfound genre, and thus the overarching universe of cyberpunk was alive and breathing. The sudden explosion of new films, books, and games, and other stories marked out the boundaries of the genre, boundaries which were explored and cemented by the books that followed. Pat Cadigan's Mind Players and Sinners focused on the psychological implications of brain modification technology. Rudy Rucker's Where series followed Neuromancer's thread of self-aware AI through its logical conclusion, showing how the resulting mechanical lifeforms evolved through successive generations. Bruce Sterling's work, like Islands in the Net, was especially interested in a hacker subculture. So there's so many different tangents of this genre. And so now you can see how the groundwork for the pen and paper game was able to be laid. Bruce Sterling said this about the cyberpunk genre as a whole. Certain central themes spring up repeatedly within cyberpunk. The theme of body invasion, prosthetic limbs, implanted circuitry, cosmetic surgery, genetic alteration. The even more powerful theme of mind invasion, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, neurochemistry, techniques radically redefining the nature of humanity, the nature of the self. And cyberpunk meshes these advanced technologies with the more down-to-earth concerns like drugs, dive bars, and desperation that turn people to crime. The ruling powers of cyberpunk worlds are almost always immense corporations who control access to technology. The protagonists tend to be outsiders, criminals or noir-style anti-heroes who exist on the margins of society. Bruce Sterling once again, sums it up pretty nicely. Low life and high tech. Now, the foundation for Mike Pondsmith creation was at hand. It really speaks to just how uniform the motifs and themes of this genre actually is. What I mean by that is the overall diversity of social exploration this genre allows is very broad, but operates under the same broke rules for everyone and is easy to understand and enjoy. In essence, you don't even have to have read any of the aforementioned works to easily slip into an immersed futuristic dystopian story. Here is a perfect example. Pondsmith himself actually never read the likes of Gibson or Sterling when he wrote his first iteration of Cyberpunk. And after a while, he started to incorporate their ideas into the RPG's second edition, known as Cyberpunk 2020. Basically, not all elements have to be present, and many stories incorporate their own technologies or lack thereof. So this is a perfect example of when somebody's making, a story within the genre and has never really even dabbled in that genre really before. And that just lets you know how versatile this genre is. Anybody can get into it. It's great. But the excitement and versatility of this genre started to wane. Just as Mike Pondsmith's brain and creation was starting to work into overdrive. The once molten form of cyberpunk was beginning to cool into something more solid, and for a genre where one of the key tenets is, to quote the rulebook of Cyberpunk 2020, break the rules, and that's not necessarily a good thing, right? The motifs of Gibson's Neuromancer and the other works turned into kind of a checklist. Stories of alienated loners in mirrored shades doing drugs and hacking computers quickly became the norm. So much that in the early 1990s, some of the most prominent cyberpunk books were those which pushed the formula to satirical extremes. The genre eventually started to die down. Games were largely associated to pinball and arcade machines, as Atari and Nintendo just wasn't suited for adapting Cyberpunk 2020, and especially not the satirical extremes of which was starting to become a little bit popular and kind of a trope. Other like-minded titles in the electronic gaming industry, just at the time the technology wouldn't be able to cope with the amount of immersion that a video game version of Cyberpunk 2020 would have to have, right, to make it even playable. But you also had movies like Escape from New York and Mad Max, which started to overshadow the classic cyberpunk films like Total Recall and Blade Runner. In the late 80s and early 90s, the large majority of people, or normies as we would like to call them, go with the flow, and the end of the world was gaining in popularity while cyberpunk was waning in popularity. Many people were interested in apocalypse more so than dystopian futures. The genre was still alive and well, but largely delegated to a niche market. Many hardcore supporters of the genre stayed loyal to the many works in all their forms that were, at the time, that you could actually get your hands on. But as the explosion of cyberpunk as a whole started to die down, and it was solidified as a niche genre before the mass public could even fully grasp that many of these independently loved works were actually part of a greater genre, a genre that was beginning to be left in the dark. The genre's creator, Bruce Bethke, described its lull in popularity. What happened to cyberpunk fiction was what happens to every successful new thing in any branch of pop culture. It went from being something unexpected, fresh and original, to being a trendy fashion statement, to being the flavor of the month, to being a repeatable commercial formula, to being a hoary trope. It looked like cyberpunk may have run its course. As early as 1993, a Wired magazine headline proclaimed, "Cyberpunk, RIP, R.I.P." But what followed as the millennium raced to its conclusion made for possibly the genre's biggest moment in the spotlight. Its influence leaked outwards, and the genre mutated in a dozen different directions, with Mike Pondsmith's R. Telsorian Games joining the corporate scene as the genre of cyberpunk finally entered the mainstream, and it never looked back. I hope you have enjoyed part 1 of Cyberpunk 2077 Explained. This condensed deep dive has allowed us to navigate the backstory of the genre so we can fully flesh out and explain what Cyberpunk 2077 actually is in its current state of existence. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in part 2. So, if you are still watching, please drop in the comments below and let me know what you thought about that cliffhanger. Was it good? I'm trying to keep the videos, not an hour long, so we're going to try to make this a little series, right? And keep in mind that it is just part 1. If we can get to like 30 likes, at least 500 views, we will continue this and make it a full series, or at least a 2 to 3 parter, and get it out as soon as possible. If we don't hit that goal, it's no biggie. I'll still make it, and it'll just take some time for part 2 to get out, and it's whatever. And just to be honest here, I also used a portion of Polygon's article about the cyberpunk genre history. They compiled even a broader list than I of cyberpunk titles that you can check out. It is worth checking out. I coupled that along with my own research and have compiled what I think is the most condensed and easily explained birth of the cyberpunk genre. And that is this video, part 1 of a series. In the next part, we will discuss the lineage of Cyberpunk 2020 and its transformation into the modern era, bringing with it its own fair share of hardships and successes. Part 2 should bring us up to today's historical happenings with CD Projekt Red and R. Telsorian Games partnership in the creating our beloved Cyberpunk 2077. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you guys are too. Super stoked, super hyped for Cyberpunk 2077. And if you have ever made an evil laugh while biting the heads off all of your gummy bears, then smash that like button and subscribe if you're new. And until next time, piss off.
2 to the 1, 1, 2, 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe, and I get more ass than a toilet seat. 3 to the 1, 1, 2, 3. I met a bad bitch last night in the D. Let me tell you how I made her leave with me. Conversation and Hennessy. I had